Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the 40th Distinguished Patterson Lecture here at Northwestern. I'm Hani Mamasani, I'm Director of the Northwestern University Transportation Center, and I'm also the holder of the Distinguished Patterson Chair in Transportation at Northwestern, which means that I have the privilege of introducing this lecture. And that I consider this to be the best part of my job, that I get to every year to introduce our Patterson lecture. So delighted to have all of you here. Welcome to in-person lectures. We have a very special guest today, but I will not be the one to introduce him. Someone else will. But first, I want to say a few words about the Patterson Lecture itself. The Patterson Lecture serves as the kind of the focal point, really, of transportation activity at Northwestern. It's sort of the culmination of what we do in a given year. It was set up through an endowment for the Patterson Chair, set up in honor of William Patterson, who was the longtime boss of United Airlines, and the endowment was established in 1978, and so part of what it supports, of course, is my position at the university. It also supports a lot of the activities we do through the center, and it supports this particular lecture. And so we're, again, delighted that to have a very special guest with us today. There are two important things about this lecture. A, it is the 40th, and that's a big number. Of course, I see here, when we've had many important CEOs, very significant leaders in transportation who have been honored as our distinguished speakers. In particular, I'm looking right here. We have the 39th Patterson speaker, Ann Drake. So welcome, Ann. Delighted to have you back here today. It is the 40th. There is also something else that is important about it, is that we've as you know, of course, our speaker today is the CEO of Delta Airlines. We have had, as previous speakers, we've had CEOs of United and American. And of course, we know that Chicago is kind of, maybe not the biggest hub for Delta, maybe not a hub for Delta, but we thought it was time to rectify this. And so we were delighted to be welcoming Mr. Ed Bastian as Delta CEO. But somebody else is going to tell us more about Ed. And I'm very pleased here to introduce Perry Cantarutti, who is a longtime member of our Business Advisory Council, representing Delta on our council, and also a good friend of the center and all of us at the center. Perry is in charge of all the sort of worldwide network alliances that Delta has, and for a while was in fact the CEO of the SkyTeam organization, was based in Paris, I believe. So we didn't see him for a couple of years, but we're glad to have him back here. Perry has had a long, distinguished career at Delta in the airline industry, and he is an NU alum. He got his MBA at Kellogg, so we're again pleased to welcome him back here. And he did his undergraduate work at UC Berkeley. And without further ado, I will like to introduce Perry.
I have to say that it is pretty cool to be in Chicago with a Delta story. And it's very nice to be together as well. So before I tell you a little bit about Ed, I just wanted to take a minute and say that, for me, tonight kind of completes a circle, and maybe a life arc, if you will, because 30 years ago, I was sitting in this audience at the 11th Patterson Lecture, and it was Mr. J.B. Hunt that was speaking at that occasion, the namesake of the, of course, very well-known trucking company. I really wanted an airline CEO that night, but we had Mr. Hunt, and it was a great speech. And at that time, I was about to graduate from Northwestern with a real desire to go enter the airline business. And I give a lot of credit to the Transportation Center for helping me to make that pivot in my career and to make opportunities available to me in the airline business. 30 years later, I'm still in the airline business. I still love it. It's a crazy business. But the role that Northwestern played was really significant. So I was really excited in 2019 when I asked Ed if he would be willing to consider giving the Patterson lecture, which I knew is the kind of pinnacle of the year for the Transportation Center. And with no hesitation, Ed agreed. I want you to set your minds back to 2019. It was a different world. It was a different world for Delta. It was a different world for the airline industry. It was a different world for the world. Delta at that time was celebrating our most profitable year in our history. That was extending about a decade-long run of continued expansion. And the future looked really bright. And then, of course, came March of 2020. And the challenge that we all faced, but very profoundly in the airline business that we faced to shut the airline down. It is not normal for people that run businesses like ours that are heavy operational intensive businesses to just shut down. And that's what we were faced with in March of 2020. Ed is an amazing leader. I've had the pleasure and the honor of working for him and with him for more than 15 years. And I remember in the early days of the pandemic, we didn't know what the depths of the trough were. And I remember even then, Ed saying, we've got to take the long view. We've got to think not about tomorrow, not about next month. We've got to think about the long view for our business. And in fact, we were in a meeting yesterday, an executive meeting in Atlanta, and that same message holds true today. And that's what we were hearing yesterday is, you know what, the pandemic is the pandemic, but we have to really take the long view and make this something that we can learn from and that we can benefit from. I remind you that Ed led us through COVID without furloughing any Delta employees, 75,000 employees around the world. Thank you for that. And brings us out of the pandemic stronger, more resilient, more capable than we went into the pandemic. This is also not the first crisis that Ed has led the company through. He was at the helm during the times of our Chapter 11 reorganization, as well as the 9/11 crisis, which, you look back on 9/11, which was a tragedy of epic proportions, and it looks sort of tame by the pandemic standards. In addition to that, he has helped Delta really aspire for better performance, better customer satisfaction, and really always a higher level of achievement. Ed joined us in 1998, and since becoming the CEO in 2016, Delta has become the most awarded airline in the US, named the top US airline by the Wall Street Journal, also one of Fortune's world's most admired companies, and most recently, the #1 North American airline by J.D. Power. In 2021, also kind of diversifying some of the accolades that Ed has received, he was named among the top 10 CEOs in the Glassdoor Employee Choice Awards. Ed, I can tell you as a colleague and as an employee at Delta, is got a high profile. He's well loved by our staff. This morning, he might tell you a little bit about this. He was on the tarmac in Atlanta for our annual, except for the pandemic years, jet pull, hosting teams of 20 employees pulling a 757 from a standing stop to, 20 feet? 20 feet in record time. So Ed doesn't sit in the boardroom. He's out with our employees. He's out with our customers. And I think that's also part of what makes him a great leader. I know tonight that he's going to talk to us about how we weathered the pandemic, where we've come from, but more importantly, where we're going. And I think that's really what we all need to focus on, is what we can learn from the past couple of years. So without further ado, I'd like to invite to the stage a friend and the CEO of Delta Airlines, Ed Bastian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Perry.
Great. So we have a format today where Ed is going to first say a few words, few thoughts, and then it will be continued in a fireside chat manner where we're going to invite Dr. Danielle Robinson-Bell, who's on the faculty in the Medill School of Journalism, Media and Integrated Marketing Communications. She also has about 15 years of experience on the agency side of advertising and branding. She is a double alumni of Northwestern, earning bachelor's degrees from Medill and holding an MBA from Kellogg. And so I'd like to, again, invite Ed to say a few words, and then Danielle, if you would join him on stage and continue the conversation.
Well, thank you, Hani, and can you hear me okay? Am I on? Good. Well, it's an honor to be here, Hani. Thank you for the introduction. Sorry it took so long, but we got it done after 3 years, Ferry, so we were able to fulfill that commitment. And it's a real pleasure to be the first CEO of Delta Airlines, who is, we consider ourselves the best and the biggest airline. We were the biggest airline pre-pandemic in the world. So it's only fitting that we're here, as that we're coming out of the pandemic and welcoming you all tonight. I also know that you're sitting in football player chairs, and I hope not too many of you fall asleep during the meeting. Those chairs are very, very comfortable. I know I always fall asleep at movies. That's why I don't go to movies anymore, because the comfortable chairs they've got in the theaters these days. But I think it'll be a fascinating conversation. As Perry mentioned, we've been through a crisis of epic proportion. I'm not sure there is an industry, period, that was more impacted than the airline industry. We went in 2019, which was our last year pre-pandemic, highest revenues, highest performance, highest customer satisfaction, you name it, of any airline in the world, to 30 days into March, we were down to less than 5% of our revenues, literally overnight, from the highest highs to the lowest lows. And it was even more dramatic than that sounds. And the fact that we can live to talk about it today is a real testament to the courage and the vision of not just our people in our company, but our nation's leaders. At the dinner table tonight, we were talking a little bit about those early days through the pandemic and conversations with the White House and our nation's leaders that we got to make certain that the airlines in this country don't collapse because of the pandemic, because we certainly would have collapsed, and we're the very first industry that was highlighted as an essential service that the nation's leaders had the foresight to keep operating, to keep the employees on the payroll. And as a result of that, we're now seeing demand at historic levels. And any of you that are traveling, I'm sure a number of you are, you can see that. Planes are traveling, planes are full, businesses are back, and they're back with a vengeance, because people not only are making up for lost time, they're traveling for new opportunities that they may have previously taken for granted that aren't going to take for granted any longer. So it's an honor to be here. I look forward to having the conversation with Danielle. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Ed, hi.
How are you?
Ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
Let's jump right in. All right.
Okay.
Both you and Perry alluded to the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic wasn't the first crisis that you've been through at Delta, right? So as a leader, what would you say are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned as you navigate these types of disruptions?
Well, I don't hope there's not a bigger one out there than
Right.
And by the way, if there is, Perry, you got it, because I'm out. You get a battlefield promotion. There were so many lessons. I could talk on that question for an hour. What we learned, and I think there were a couple things that I'll speak to. First, at the very start of the pandemic, I was having breakfast. This is second week in March of 2020, and clearly none of us knew what in the world was going on, other than that it was we were headed for a really bad time. My chairman is a fellow by the name of Frank Blake. He was the CEO and chairman of the Home Depot company, had just retired, and so he's the chairman of our board at Delta. I remember him talking and saying that this will, test and display the character of our company and our people and our leadership like never before. People think that out of crisis, character is formed, strength is formed. And the reality is, if you don't have character and you don't know your values going into a crisis, you're not going to make it. And so it revealed the character, because he knew the character of the company was strong. He knew our leadership team and our people were strong. And that was going to be displayed in how we proceeded with every decision. And I made, and we all needed to make literally hundreds and hundreds of decisions a week as we were navigating all this uncertainty. Every morning I woke up and I remembered that inspiration in my ear that today's decisions are going to reveal the character of this company and how we want to be reflected on the other side of that. I'd say the other thing that was really clear, and I can, at the time, you don't know, it's so instinctive. You're in there and you're just trying to survive and keep people buoyed and spirit. You just don't, and you can't make promises because you don't know what exactly is going to come as around the corner for you. But it was never more important as a leader to be able to absorb the pressure, absorb the uncertainty, the anxiety of the entire company at a certain level. Leaders in a crisis, particularly a crisis of epic proportion, can't amplify the crisis. You can't actually propel and display your anxiety. You've got to acknowledge the uncertainty. You've got to face the ugly reality that you're in. But at the same time, you have to find a way to have optimism, to have confidence, to instill hope that you're going to get through this, even when there's no logical understanding of how you're going to get there. And there wasn't, right? I mean, if I wrote a plan out, I'd say the third week of March of 2020, I had like 7 bullet points that I shared with the board. I mean, I didn't even bother to do, typical PowerPoint and email. I mean, I just wrote on a scrap of paper, and I walked them through it. And in there was the essence of the plan that we actually implemented. But the core of it was, we were going to do our very best to control the things we could control, and those things that we were out of our control, we just weren't going to stress over.
Gotcha. Nice. So one of the phrases that came about as a result of the pandemic is this idea of the new normal, right? It's almost cliche at this point, but it's this idea that things are going to change, have changed, will change, right? How has air travel changed?
Well, air travel has changed in a very, very big way, and I think everyone is going to get a chance to see that. The air travel that we have today is not the air travel that we're going to have tomorrow. Right now, you have so many people traveling. I mean, the volumes of travelers that we have, and it's really been over the last 2 months, are epic proportion. And we're almost every plane and not just Delta, every airline out there are carrying our full. The challenges of managing that level of volume from almost a standing still position is incredible. But once we get through this surge and get to a more stable place, it might take 6 months, 9 months before things start to stabilize and get into a regular pattern. Customers on Delta are going to see a newer experience. We got rid of, over 200 of our oldest planes are gone, during the pandemic. We kept buying new planes, during that period of time. So our fleet age, as we think about it, got 2 years younger from where we sit today, even though chronologically we're 2 years older. So that's a 4-year swing that we had just on the airplane side itself. Our airport experience has radically changed. We opened last week a brand new airport in Los Angeles. Old Terminal 2 and 3, we consolidated them. And these projects were going to take years into the future. We were able to put the pedal to the metal because I knew we were going to get through. So we accelerated development and investment in these projects. We're opening next month a brand new LaGuardia Airport. We've got a new airport we opened in Seattle last month. We've got Salt Lake City Airport we opened last year. We got another phase. We got the old final phase of JFK coming online next year. So you're going to have a very different ground experience as well. And technology has also changed radically. We're moving to the cloud. All of our technology systems are going to the Amazon cloud, AWS. And Wi-Fi, which has always been a bugaboo for many people in this room. Commercial airline Wi-Fi just does not work. And when it does work, you pay an arm and a leg for it. We're going to eliminate all that. We're going to get to free. As an airline, we've changed our provider. Our old provider was called GoGo. They're no-go. They're off. And we got a new provider, and you're going to be able to stream. It's going to be an amazing experience, coming in a relatively very, very short period of time, because we were able to accelerate all the things that mattered in the company. The other thing that will be less obvious to our customers, but will be critical to the airline itself, is that we had a lot of people. We didn't furlough or lay off a single person. We didn't cut the pay. The only person who got his pay cut to zero was me. I cut my pay for the entire year, but no one else in the company to zero. But we had a lot of people retire. So because we made early retirement offers, because we didn't know how long this thing. We had about 20,000 people retire. Really? All voluntarily, and we made good retirement inducements. But as a result of that, it opened up enormous opportunity for younger people to take on leadership roles, to take on new roles. In our company today, we have over 80,000 employees. 40% of all of the leaders in the company, from the very top, the people that report to me, all the way down to our supervisors on the ramp and working with mechanics and our in-flight team, are new in position, either a new leader or have new responsibilities. 40% in the space of a year at scale. You can't envision what that's like in terms of managing, and yet they're performing exceptionally well in that environment. So we're bringing a whole lot of new thought. We're bringing a whole lot of new diversity. It's a more inclusive organization and leadership. We have opportunities to come from the front lines into the management team, and it's exceptional. So there's an energy about where we're going, which is really vibrant, and it's real exciting, and I look forward to you all experiencing and tasting that on Delta soon.
I can't wait. That sounds so exciting. And you mentioned the employees, and we'll get to that in a second, the whole skills first. But you mentioned retirees and this new pool of talent that's now in the organization. So when you think about business travel, do you think that's going to come back in the same way? Or are we in a different era? When
business travel is already back. And anyone that tells you, these technology companies that say we're going to live a virtual world, I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah, they can give it a shot. I remember Bill Gates said it was only going to be 50%. When I said immediately it was crazy. It is crazy. Business travel, in terms of volumes, already are over 80% back, and really travel's really just started in meaningful terms in the last couple months. And on the actual revenue side, it's already back to about 100%. Because people need to get out, they need to be with their people. I do think that video technology and tools like that are going to put a dent in some form of business travel, because there's traditional travel that was inefficient, that I think we always knew we probably didn't need to do that trip. We really won't take that trip now, an overnight to Europe to have a meeting and get back on the plane. And it just kills you physically and mentally. That stuff's gone. And you can do a Zoom meeting, you can do some other way that you can connect with someone. But what's going to take its place, and I think that's probably in the 20 to 30% range of the volume of traditional travel. But think about all the new forms of travel that are being prompted. Think about companies, they're hiring people all over the country, all over the world actually, and they're telling them, we don't care where you live, and they're having to commute into the office from other parts of the country or the world on a regular basis. That's new travel. Video technology, the big ruse, and again, I'm not the tech guys may get upset with me sometimes, but the notion that video technology actually forces you to stay in your house and not leave your house is nuts. Video technology enables you to get out of your house and bring your house, or bring your office, or bring with you and where you go. And so it enhances mobility, and so you have new ways of work, you have new places of work, you have new schedules of work. All the hybrid, I don't think we're going back to a world where it's 9 to 5 in the office 5 days a week. I think we'll be, the hybrid of maybe 3 days a week, which means people can have more flexibility in their schedule and they can take their work product with them. So I think we're going to be actually on the other side of that, probably have more business travel than even we had pre-COVID.
Interesting way of framing that, actually. And let's stay there for a second. So people want to get out, right? We are here, it's May 2022. We are more open, right, in terms of where we are in this pandemic. And so as the world continues to reopen, let's talk about Delta's international strategy.
Yeah.
Right? How is Delta viewing its global partnerships and alliances?
Well, our international partnerships are critical to our future. I said this pre-COVID, and it's even more important now, is that in the long term, in our business, we need to be seen as a global company, as a global airline, as the global airline is our objective. And right now, all of the big airlines in the U.S., United here in Chicago, us, American, the majority of our revenues are U.S.-based. At Delta, we're about 60, and pre-COVID now, they're about 60-40, 60% U.S., 40% international. But there's no more places to fly. Where else are you going to fly in the U.S.? What new market we're going to find? It just doesn't exist, right? So we're building bigger planes, but bringing them into the same airport. So we're going to get to a point of saturation here relatively soon over the next decade on U.S. travel. So the opportunity is global. There's many, many places to fly around the world, and it's not. So Delta's taken a very different strategy. We have airlines and partners all around the world, but we've taken actually an ownership stake in these. We have alliances. You hear about alliances, and Delta's SkyTeam Alliance, United's in Star, and American's in Oneworld. We're not huge alliance fans, even though Perry ran SkyTeam for Delta for lots of years. We're about the Delta team. Okay. And so what we've done is we've gone in and invested in international airlines all around the world. And so Virgin Atlantic, for example, the airline in London that Richard Branson owns 51% of, we own 49% of Virgin. So Branson, so we're partners together. Right. And so we've got Virgin, Air France, KLM, we have a 10% ownership stake of. We've got the same thing in Aeromexico. We've got a 20% stake in Aeromexico. The LATAM group in South America, Korean Airlines, we have 15%. We have an ownership stake in China Eastern. And the reason we've taken these ownership stakes is because customers need to connect seamlessly internationally. And any of you that have traveled, I see many international faces in the audience. You travel internationally. You know, international travel can be nightmare handoffs between airlines and lost bags and messages, and an airline, the customer can be seen as a premium for one airline, but their partners, they're treated like dirt, in another. How do you influence all of the airlines that you work with around the world to take the same view of the customer and to put the customer first and to drive a seamless connectivity for technology? And the only way, you can't do that through contract. You can't just be partners. You've got to actually be in the boardroom, and you got to pound the table and demand change, and that's what we're doing. And so the customers within our group are actually going to be seen globally as part of a bigger network and a bigger team, and I think it's going to attract more and more travel, more and more opportunity to Delta as a result.
All right. So let's shift gears for a second, okay? So tomorrow at the Advisory Council meeting, there's going to be a discussion on the decarbonization of transportation. So talk to us a bit about Delta's strategic vision for sustainability. And specifically, what are some of the most promising near-term actions that Delta and other airlines are going to take to reduce their carbon footprint?
COVID was hard to get through these last couple of years. Sustainability, candidly, may be an even bigger challenge than COVID was for our company. It's that significant. And the reason I say that is 98% of our airline, of all airlines around the world, footprint is jet fuel. And there is not a substitute for jet fuel in our industry. And it's the bulk of what we fly. So we're doing an awful lot in a lot of different dimensions. But one of the most important things that we need, and we're with the White House and the administration, probably what I spend the most amount of time in Washington these days on, is sustainability, is bringing together resources to invest in sustainable aviation fuels. There are sustainable aviation fuels today. They're nascent though. If Delta were to go out and acquire all the sustainable aviation fuels that are produced in our country, the 100%, it'd be enough for us to fuel our planes, and only Delta planes, one day of the year. It's that dramatic in terms of the gap. And the reason there's a gap is not for lack of ideas, it's not for lack of technology or capability, it's for lack of capital. And the energy companies aren't willing to invest the billions of dollars in unknown technologies at scale that's going to take to convert resources to produce sustainable aviation fuels. If we went out and bought sustainable aviation fuels, which we do, on the market today, it would cost somewhere between 3 to 5 times what it costs for a gallon of jet fuel today. We can't afford to invest at that scale. So the government needs to come in, and we're having, and the White House agrees with this, by the way, and the administration. So we're making good progress and provide tax credits for companies to invest, for the BPs and the Chevrons to start to convert some of their production away from diesel or renewables into creating these sustainable aviation fuels. We're willing to sign up. We signed up at Delta that 10% of our entire fuel stock will be sustainable by the end of this decade. 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but today that number is less than 1%. And we are committed to a net zero aviation impact by the year 2050. That's part of it. Engine technology is a big part of it. Every plane we bring in, I talked about we got rid of a lot of old planes. Yeah. Every plane that we bring in is 25% more fuel efficient than the planes we retire. Nice. Huge impact. Over time, hydrogen is going to have a big assist in terms of the propulsion technology. That's probably 15 to 20 years from now in terms of being able to create it at scale, but it's available. Electrification, our ground service equipment at the airports. You see tugs and cars and trucks all over the place running around. By the end of next year, 50% of all of our ground equipment at our airports will be electrified, and 100% in 5 years. So we're doing an awful lot. We're doing a lot on the planes itself, taking all the plastic out of the planes. We just introduced our new amenity kits on our international, asking about international. The blankets that we give customers are now made out of 100% of PET bottles, recycled PET bottles. And they're no longer in a plastic wrap where you pull off, there's no plastic seam. And the actual amenity kits and the blankets, they're all 100% organic, in terms of recycled material. So we're doing everything, and it's going to take a lot more things, but as I say, it's a bigger challenge than COVID in terms of navigating sustainability because we have to get there.
Now I really can't wait to get on a Delta flight. Blankets is great. So we talked about.
We can go buy a ticket now.
Let's go. Where are we going to go?
Exactly.
Global. Nowhere in the States, right? So when you think about impact and responsibility, one way to think about it is, people, planet, profit, right? We just talked about planet, right? So let's talk about people for a second. Despite the pandemic, Delta has been fiercely committed to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's placing a emphasis on closing diversity gaps within the workforce. And you alluded to this when we first started talking, but can you talk to us a little bit about this idea of a skills-first approach to talent at Delta?
Sure. One of the things that's critical for us to close our diversity gaps and be a fully inclusive employer is we have to find new sources of talent for our company. Let's talk about the job classification, which you can all guess, that is the least diverse in our company, are pilots. Over 90% are white male. And if we allow the same model, looking for the same places, out of the military, out of places that are the traditional source of pilots, we're going to wind up continuing to replicate what we already have. So we went out last year, and I'm so proud of our company for doing this, and we've eliminated college education, a 4-year degree to be a pilot. I think we're the first airline to have done that. Wow. And looking at, you think about how hard it is for underrepresented groups to be able to get into that door. And by the way, it costs a lot of money to learn to be a pilot. Forget the cost of a 4-year degree, just the training and the hours you have to accumulate. We've eliminated. So 98% of the jobs in the company no longer require a 4-year degree. And I probably shouldn't be saying that here because I'm glad you guys got your degrees. And you're not an elitist group. Trust me, I'm not saying that. But for us to change the face of our company, we got to change the face of what we do, right? And so going with skills and people that have proven they have talent, regardless of the opportunity that they were born into, are people we want in our company. And we're doing that across technology, across our mechanics. You know, people, you talk to kids in high school or in grade school even, you know, we hear a little bit talk about pilot shortages, and there's a little bit of that. Pilot shortage is going to take care of itself because they make a lot of money. So people will find the opportunities there. But you talk about mechanics. Kids think you're talking about an auto mechanic. Well, trained aircraft technicians, you'll make well over $100,000 a year, probably close to $150,000 a year. It's a great job, and you can do it with a two-year degree, and with technical training. And by the way, you'll get there. You know, no disrespect. You know, probably faster than many of you sitting in your seats because we have the need and we have the opportunity now. So there's a lot of things that we can do to move faster, you know, through this, and the team's doing a good job in that.
So you're still taking resumes?
Still taking resumes.
Okay, gotcha.
Still taking resumes.
I got you. Okay, so customers.
Yeah.
When customers fly Delta, what do they have to look forward to?
What do they have to look forward to? First and foremost, it's going to be a highly reliable experience. You know, we always want to talk about the fancy stuff. You know, what customers really want is we're going to get you there on time. We're not going to cancel your flight. You're going to get there with your bags. You're going to get there safely, and you're going to be greeted with a smile, you know, throughout the experience. And it's going to put a smile on your face. And that's what Delta does better than anyone. And we've been the most reliable airline in the world for the last 10 plus years running. We've in the world, by the way, we just got named last year. And that provides a platform where you can do all the sexy stuff. Sure. So the hard stuff, and I'll tell a little story just how we got there. We bought in 2009 Northwest. Delta bought or merged with Northwest. And Perry was on the Northwest side, I was on the Delta side. You know, we came, it was a good marriage, we came together. And we were the first of the big airline mergers, Delta and Northwest in 2009. And we finally put the companies together, I think it was the summer of 2010. And Northwest, everything that Northwest had, Delta had something different. Different plane types, different technologies, you name it. And we saw this is going to be one big happy family. We have one of everything. And by the way, you try to operate at scale that, everything starts breaking and things don't talk and don't connect. And one of the biggest challenges we had was in the maintenance. So that year at Delta, at the combined Delta Northwest, we had 6,000 cancellations that year for maintenance reasons that were preventable. Forget weather, air traffic control, all the normal reasons why. These are things we control. Yep. That meant we canceled like 3 full days for reasons that we just didn't have the parts in the right place. We didn't have the engineering. And we said, we got to cancel cancellations, right? We got to start with the basics. Yep. 2019, that number, 6,000, that number was 60. Wow. A 99% reduction in defects. And when you do that, and people have asked me, and those of you that are in Chicago, I appreciate you may not fly Delta an awful lot, but you're going to. You're coming. I know you're coming. When you get on a Delta plane, people said, something's just different. Flight attendants are happier. Everyone, and the reason everyone's happier is we treat our people really well, but we give them the tool, the product to work, because the foundation works. The worst thing in the world, you can imagine the job of an airline agent where you just canceled a flight of 200 people that are really pissed at you, right? And they're there and they have no place to go, right? And we've all been there, right? I've been there. I've been a traveler, business traveler for 40 years, right? That's the worst thing you can do to your people. When you eliminate that and you get them there on time and just everything works well, it's the investment in the foundational stuff that we do better than anybody. And that's why this past year, and we continue, even with the build back from the recovery, we're leading the industry by large measures. We're not having those types of cancellations or those problems. Then on top of that, the other thing that we're investing heavily at Delta is in premium experience. And why you say premium experience, again, this isn't trying to be like, all lie flat beds and all ultra luxury stuff. This is actually, moving out of the main cabin and sitting in Comfort Plus, which you have an extra few inches of space, or into first class, which actually doesn't cost all that much different than sitting in the cabin. It might be a $150 increase, which for some people might be a lot, but for a lot of people, when they see what they get for it, right, they say, I want to stay there. I want that experience. Right. And we've led throughout the pandemic. It was interesting, at the start of the pandemic, people said Delta was going to die because Delta had this premium strategy we've been going after for a decade. And only the guys that are real cheap, the low-cost carriers, they're the only airlines that are going to be able to survive a pandemic. It turned out to be just the opposite. And I knew it would be just the opposite. Because customers want choice. They want a healthier experience, focus on wellness, focus on the person. And they said, I'm not going back. So when you ask me about, is it business travel? I'm pretty relaxed about what's going to happen in business travel. And I tell a lot of the big corporate CEOs in the country, guys, we're not waiting for you, because we got a lot of customers that are flying those seats right now. Right. And you're gonna have to pay to get in those seats, so you better get going to catch up with us. So that's that you're seeing, and that's going to buy. So our newest plane is the Airbus 321neo. We've got 150 of those coming. We just took our first one last month. A full 1/3 of the seats on the airplane, it's a domestic airplane, not international, domestic airplane. A full 1/3 of the seats on the airplane are premium seats. It's a different experience. It's different, and it's fun. And by the way, people are enjoying it. And what you see about this component of the luxury I'm talking about here for the airline, the same thing's happening in retail. It's happening in a lot of goods and services around the country. The consumers got wealth. They're investing in themselves, and they're saying, I'm not going back, and I want to move forward.
All right. Before I turn it over to Hani in the audience, I want to say thank you.
Thank you,
You're very busy. You have a choice of where you can be this evening, and you chose to be here with us. So thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Ed. So we're going to open it up for questions at this point from the audience. We're going to ask you those who would like to ask a question, to please go to the middle area. There are people waiting with microphones, so you could ask your question and everybody can hear it. And I would like to start. Okay, all right. Well, and please introduce yourself when you ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My name is Marcos Rios, and I'm a second year at Northwestern studying industrial engineering, data science, and the transportation logistics minor.
That's a mouthful.
Yes. My question to you really centers around what role should transportation companies take in managing public health crises? You spoke a lot about the actions you're taking after the pandemic. Please speak on the ones you took during it.
We were, honestly, while we're not a healthcare company or a biotech company or in the pharma space, we were a leader in keeping our people and keeping our public safe during the pandemic. The last 2 years, governments were telling people to stay home, don't be out, don't travel. We had to travel because people needed to get place. People needed to get to bedsides of loved ones that were dying. Medical workers needed to get to the front lines of the crisis. The supply chains needed to maintain. And part of our deal with the government when we agreed to sign up to the CARES Act is that we would keep all of our routes open. So if you weren't traveling during the pandemic, you missed the best time to travel. If you wanted a personal experience, it was incredible. There were 5 people on our plane, and we were losing a ton of money, but we were doing it safely, and we were doing it with health. Cleanliness of our cabins, cleanliness of airports, completely reimagined. The filtration systems on our airplanes, same quality filtration systems you'll see in a hospital emergency operating room that we have on the clean air on our cabins. The fact that government, until recently, was still mandating masks on airplanes is crazy. It's the cleanest place you can be, is to be on board a cabin. And by the way, on top of that, people aren't moving around. When you're moving around, that's when dust particles and spread occurs, but everyone's kind of controlled, locked down, you've got in your seatbelt, and it's clean air. We had to lead in terms of getting our people tested. We had, at Delta, we hosted the largest vaccine clinic in the state of Georgia. We vaccinated 150,000 people on our campus, kind of leading the return through the recovery. And on the other side of that, one of the people that I hired, I think strategically, maybe the most important person I've hired in the last 10 years, is a fellow I hired from the Mayo Clinic to be my chief health officer. His name is Dr. Henry Ting. He was one of the very top doctors at Mayo. He helped me, guide me through the pandemic. We didn't have a chief medical officer. He helped me kind of think about it, and he's now helping us well beyond the pandemic, thinking about wellness, thinking about emotional well-being, thinking about social well-being, thinking about financial well-being. All the stuff that we still don't know the damage that the pandemic has done to our society. And you know, I run an 80,000 person company with 200 million customers a year. I deal with a lot of those challenges and all those aspects, and I've got a strategic partner and focus around that. So wellness and resiliency is going to be part of the core of what we produce. And it kind of goes into the product, it goes into the service, and it goes out to all of our people.
Hi, Ed. My name's Andrew Boyle. My company's called Boyle Transportation, so I'm in the trucking business.
Yes.
And as some of us like to say, a bad day in trucking still beats a good day in the airlines. The sexiest of all the modes. So thanks for
I hear you.
your leadership in this salary forfeiture. Some of us followed suit soon thereafter, but it was a good demonstration. My question pertains to fuel. So if I recall, was it 5 or 6 years ago, you all became more vertically integrated and bought a refinery up in PA
That's
or
right,
Delaware or something?
outside of Philadelphia, yeah.
Okay, so could you elaborate a little bit as to how that contributes? I don't know what proportion of the total fuel spend is attributable to that refinery, but
Right.
how that strategy is played out?
So it was about 10 years ago, Andrew, where we bought the refinery. It was a closed refinery. We bought it from ConocoPhillips. It was over 100 years old. It was an old refinery. It was just outside on the Delaware River, just outside of Philadelphia. And the reason we bought it was the last time fuel was really starting to spike over $100 a barrel. It's starting to get expensive. It was a 2012 timeframe that we did that. And we bought it, we paid about $150 million for the refinery and put a little bit, about another $150 million in the capital. We were already spending so much on our fuel bill. We said we had nothing to lose, you know, if we could kind of try to get at it. And in the oil business, there's two components of oil. There's the crude barrel, which you can't do anything about. That's coming out of Africa, it's coming out of the Middle East, it's coming out of the shale regions in our country. That today is around $100 a barrel, plus or minus. And then there's the refined spread, which is called the crack spread. And when you refine a barrel of oil, it goes into various products. About the most you can generate out of a barrel of oil is into jet fuel is about 20%. So 20% comes out in jet fuel. 50% is gasoline. 25% in heating oil or diesel and a few other ancillary products. So we said we want to go in and make our own jet fuel and save that crack and put it in our pocket and then cut out the middleman. And it was very successful. We did well. Refineries are expensive. They absorb a lot of capital. So it's the great thing about a refinery is every 5 years you have to decide whether you're going to buy it again because you got to go basically you got to restore it, especially old ones. And so fortunately we've done that a couple of times. Right now, it's unbelievable. In the current quarter, we expect we're going to generate somewhere between $300 and $400 million of profit from the refinery just this quarter, the quarter that we're in, because the crack spread, the refined cost has just exploded, particularly in the Northeast. So it's working really well. Hedging fuel is not something for the faint of heart. It's a financial bet on the markets. We got out of that world. We said we can't outcompete the markets, so we don't hedge fuel. We actually have a physical hedge because we actually create our own production. And by the way, all the other product that we produce, the gasoline, the diesel, we trade those and sell those to BP and Chevron and Exxon and supply their needs in the Northeast, and they give us their jet fuel production in other parts of the country. So we've totally eliminated the middleman, and it's been a great endeavor. Excuse me?
Question on this side.
What percentage of your fuel comes from that? Well, so indirectly, 75%, between both the jet fuel that we produce for ourselves and then what we trade for others. It's a pretty good deal.
Hi there, my name is Emily Uniman. I am a second-year student at Kellogg Northwestern. Thank you for being here. You began your talk talking about the importance of values and how knowing your values were incredibly important as you face the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic. Here at Kellogg, we have a lot of curriculum dedicated to, as future business leaders, understanding our own values and really taking the time to reflect and understand what they are thoroughly. Can you talk about, throughout your career, how you've come to develop those values and how they potentially adapted as you progressed in your career?
Sure. Well, values aren't something that you consciously say, I'm going to go develop, my values. I was fortunate, grew up in a large family, 9 kids. My parents, my mom particularly was my hero in life. I unfortunately lost her just as the pandemic started. But I had good values instilled in me, hard work and focus and confidence that success is available. That if you engage and you're very focused on it. But then as you get into business, it's really important that the companies that you work for and the companies that you keep amongst you, the colleagues, the people around you, and it's something you tell your kids growing up. You want them to be with good kids, good family, whatever, and good influences. The same thing is true for all of us. We are a product of the people that we're with and who we spend our time with. And as a result of that, you learn from them, you watch, you discuss, you talk about topics. And you want to be with people that lift you, that cause you to think about things you haven't thought about, have challenged you, that are going to be honest with you. And are going to, if you're a CEO of a large company, as I am, I have a hard time sometimes finding people that are honest with me, and they tell me what I want to hear about it, except for Perry. Perry always tells me to be honest. So you got to find people that don't care that I'm the CEO. They care about me as a person, and they invest in you, and mentors. Finding some good mentors. And I'll give you a great example of how I applied that coming out of school. I went to a small school in Western New York. As an accounting major. I had no idea how I became an airline CEO, because when I graduated college, I had never even stepped foot on an airplane until I was 25 years old. So me getting in this job, and all of you, and I do some commencement speeches. I'm going to do one at the University of Georgia next week. I'm very excited for. I tell everybody, your education is just starting. You think you're educated and you're ready to show what you got. No, you're just at the starting line. And the world is your oyster, and it's a tool. You got your education, and go develop it now, and go really learn in the world. But I was an accounting major. My dad told me I was good at math. I should be a tax accountant, and when I didn't, I don't know why, but anyway. So I was an accounting major, small school. Went to work in New York City, and there were 8 big accounting firms at the time. There's now the big 4, but there were 8. And I looked at each of the firms. And I didn't know anybody at any of the firms. I knew nothing about them. There was no internet to invest in. I mean, there was nobody really to talk about it. But I did know there was a couple firms that really had a pretty good reputation based on the clients they had. And the firm I chose was Price Waterhouse. And I got interviewed and I got offers from all 8 of the firms. Right? I went with the firm that offered me the least amount of money. They offered me to start in New York City $12,000 a year. Now, I'm dating myself, okay? It's not the Stone Ages. It's 1980, so it wasn't that long ago. $12,000 a year. And the others offered $15,000 a year. I went with the $12,000 one because I thought that they probably were going to be able to pay me in experience better than the financial value that they could bring me in terms of a salary. And that's why they could afford to pay me a little less, because they were going to make it up for in experience. And absolutely, that's what happened. And so just in little small ways, you kind of think about, but that's a value decision, right? Who you're going to be with. You're going to be with companies that are going to invest in you. They're going to care about you. And as that goes, you keep growing in your career. And then you become, importantly, a mentor to others. I learn more by mentoring people today than I do from people now mentoring me.
Yep. You have a question there. Let's go ahead.
Hi, my name is Payson Wild. I'm a Northwestern alumnus, and my question has to do with cargo.
Yeah.
One of the big growth areas has been e-commerce, and companies like Atlas Air and ATSG and others have done very well through this pandemic. Are the larger carriers, Delta included, considering moving into e-commerce and growing the cargo area in that particular manner?
Yeah, so we are definitely doing that. We're not as much for e-commerce because we have there's a lot of competition in that space, including some of the carriers you mentioned, not the least of which is UPS and FedEx and Amazon itself, which is gaining a pretty big footprint themselves in that space. But moving goods when people weren't moving was a big source, not new source of revenue, we always had it, but an additional source of revenue. We took a fair number of our commercial planes and turned them into charters, cargo carriers to dedicate. A lot of it was done for emergency relief. We were flying them to China to get the masks that you all wore during the pandemic. Who knew that the majority of masks that we wore were produced in China, and they were. And it was because of we had planes that people weren't flying to China, but we could bring masks in. A lot of what we're doing now is trying to figure out, now that customers are back and we have no dedicated aircraft, and we're not going to go out and buy dedicated aircraft, it's too big a capital charge. How do we take the bellies that we have and the relationship to kind of better optimize, particularly internationally for cargo? We're not a very efficient cargo carrier. We're efficient at putting bags on the planes, but not actually cargo. Cargo pays a lot more money than the bags, so we're getting smart on that. So we're going. Our cargo revenues year on year are up 50%. So if that tells you anything.
Hi, my name is Mike Philippe. I'm the founder of a brand new SAF startup called Exodolf.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could comment on your decision to create the first or industry first C-suite level Chief Sustainability Officer with Pamela Fletcher.
Yeah, sure. Well, good luck with your start. You said SAF? Yeah. Well, good luck. We need you to succeed. And you can send me a note. Let me know how you're doing. We can talk. Yeah. We needed to get out and to invest in sustainability in terms of leadership, not just in terms of technology. And we didn't have anyone in the company that was really a sustainability czar, because this is a nascent experience for us still. And I looked around and talked to a lot of people, and I look at the autos as a role model for us. What's cool today, right? It's driving. And I drive a Tesla. I've had it for 7 years. I love it, and I'll probably never go back to a gasoline car. But what happened is 20 years ago, they created a platform where they were able to bring people together, including the government, in a meaningful way, and say that this is something that was critical to the health of the country, to the nation's success, and the globe's success. And they invested, and Elon's a genius, and he's a hoot. I've spent some time with him. He's an interesting guy. You've got to have a vision, and you've got to have people drive and a focus. And it took them a long time. And the U.S. automakers were kind of fits and starts and not really great success. But when Tesla came around, it changed the face of it. And then all of a sudden, it attracted more capital and more government support, more consumer support. And you look at the most recent infrastructure bills that have been passed in the last year in the House and Senate, or at least floated. It's like almost half the money isn't going into the electrification of the grid for EV, for autos. And I said, we need to create that same platform in the sky as we've done on the ground. And we can do it because we have fewer of them. We have a bigger need. And so you're not driving to Europe anytime soon, or taking a boat. Right? We need to be around, and we need governments to help us provide the mandate. We need to build a coalition. Pam I hired from General Motors. She ran the EV platform for General Motors for the better part of the last 20 years. She, Cruise, the autonomous driving company, was in her portfolio at General Motors. So when I went, I said, I want, and so I plucked her from General Motors to lead that for Delta.
Yeah, because the electrification of the aircraft.
You can do that on a small scale. You can't do that at, you can't create the density.
Yeah, it doesn't have the power density. It can't replace medium and long haul.
So I'm not trying to electrify the sky.
No, I know.
But I'm trying to create the vision for what we have to do to create our own.
No, I know. And I know exactly.
If we could just move on to the next question, please. Give a
sorry.
chance for others. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm Max Shapiro. I'm a second year in the same program with Marcos. My question was about the New York to the West Coast sort of travel network and how Delta plans to continue to differentiate itself in a super competitive market there.
Yeah, so Transcon, New York to LA particularly, is the #1 market in the country in terms of, you got the 2 biggest population centers, destination centers in the country, so naturally it's the biggest. And so there's a lot of competition in there. There is, at the same time, a lot of slots restrictions, so that the government only allows a certain amount of flights into the respective airports. What we've done is we went at it hard about 15 years ago and said we're going to go big in that space. We're bringing new equipment, we're bringing new product, we're bringing new technology, we're bringing that, as I talked about, wireless free with a great streaming capability, and we're creating an experience on board that is all predicated on being really reliable, because you're also talking about flying into 2 congested airspaces. So it's not as easy to say it and as compared to just doing it. And with reliability, we're building it. Got a new airport in LAX we just opened up, I talked about. We got a new airport in LaGuardia. We're opening up next month, and a new airport we're finishing off JFK next year. So we're going to have new ground experience. We've got new aircraft. We got new amenities. I think it's going to be a killer experience. Try it and let me know how you think.
Hi, Ed. Lori Garrow from Georgia Tech.
Hey.
Good to see you again.
Home girl.
Yeah, exactly. So being in Chicago and having United as, the main carrier, I wanted to ask a question in terms of United has decided to place orders, right, for electric aircraft. And there's some sense in the industry that these electric aircraft could be used as air taxis to the airport. So starting in Marietta, Georgia, going to Atlanta in 15 minutes versus an hour and a half, leaving Evanston, going to the airport again in 15 minutes versus an hour and a half. And I'm reminded of when the jet age came in, that the original jet engine could only have a stage of like 1,500 miles. So to go from London to Tokyo, you had 10 stops to get there. But with advancements of technology, these were able to basically fly up to, let's say, 250 miles. So given a competitor is, let's say, betting on electric aircraft in the future, maybe for, let's say, trips up to smaller ones or up to 250 miles, and also the potential for potentially lowering pilot training costs on the aircraft may provide pathways forward for the pilots. I'm curious if Delta is thinking about the electrification in other ways. In particular, I'm going to argue since one of your competitors seems to be looking at it.
So the eVTOL market, as it's referred to, vertical takeoff and landing, is an interesting technology. It's got a long way to go. You're not going to see them flying anytime soon. It'll take, my guess, minimum 5 years before you start to see a little bit of it, if it's starting to happen. We're talking, to a number of companies in the space where it's not like anybody's got an advantage. United had invested a little bit of money in a couple. It's kind of, but there's 8 or 10 of them. So a lot of it is you're not quite sure which one's going to, and we've got a couple different ones that we're looking at, that we're eyeing. I think it's an interesting technology, more in terms of ground congestion than it is in the sky. It's not going to really replace flying at scale for us. What we're talking with companies, though, is not about the aircraft as much as about the customer experience. So we're working with a couple. We haven't announced yet, and we still haven't closed, and I hope to close them soon, where we're actually designing that you can take that flight in Marietta and you can land, behind security, in Atlanta, and then we've got a Porsche car waiting to take you up the stairs. That's a game changer for us. Just the fact that you can kind of take an air taxi versus a car, and that trade-off with Uber or whatever. It's not that we're not looking at playing that game. We're looking at enhancing the customer experience. We're working on that, looking at an LAX right now, and we just built a new airport, so we have the opportunity. So that's what I think you're going to see. Our focus is on the customer experience and the relevance, not just to say, we're there just because it exists.
Hi, I'm Ben Partridge. I'm a research fellow in the Department of Chemistry here. One thing we haven't heard about are kind of frequent flyer programs, and we've seen a lot of changes both at Delta and their competitors, and especially American this year revamped their program to reward customers across their ecosystem. So I have a two-part question. What's been the role of SkyMiles in driving customer loyalty as a kind of engine for pandemic recovery? And do you ever see a future where Delta's SkyMiles becomes more of a frequent spender program rather than a frequent flyer program?
Yes, yes, and yes, okay? And it already is, okay? If I were to tell you what card in the American Express stack of all cards they have that's the most valuable, drives the most amount of volume on American Express of everything, would you know it's the Delta card by a large measure? A full 10% of the entire billings worldwide, globally, that American Express has is the Delta card. And it's because of the value that consumers place on the miles that they attached relative to the spend and the investment that you got two great brands, Delta and American Express, side by side. And we're exclusive. We don't work with any other credit card provider. And American Express doesn't work with any other airline in the US other than Delta. And we're focusing our marketing muscle to that point. In a couple of years, 2024, they will pay us probably, and this is public data, probably about $7 billion a year for that credit card, for the currency. $7 billion just for the currency, and that's obviously very high margin revenue. All through the pandemic, one of the big revenue sources we had when people weren't traveling, people were still spending on their cards. Our card today, our Amex card, is about 35% higher in overall volume on it today than it was in the same month in 19. Even though people have been traveling there, because people are saying, I'm gonna travel, and I want to get those miles on Delta, and I'm gonna go when time's right. The other thing we did, which is huge in our industry, historically the airline models were kind of very standard and very basic. It was 25,000 miles to get you a domestic trip, 50,000 to get you an international trip, and it was basically kind of two tiers. About 8 or 9 years ago, it wasn't very popular at the time, we blew up the mileage charts. And we made it purely, some would say opaque, but others would say completely dynamic, so that you can price airline tickets, whether it's in cash or miles, and we're totally agnostic to it, because we'll get the miles, and we've already been paid for the miles, and that's the one way we get it, through Amex or our own program, or you can give us cash. And so about 10 to 12% of all of our tickets today that we sell are on miles, and even if it went to 50%, it's okay. I'm good with that and whatnot. So we created more utility, and we've got an incredible currency that's got enormous value. And I joke with people, we were crypto before there was crypto, and it's true. I mean, because this currency, it's got, you think about just a stream of just one provider. We're working with a lot of other providers that's paying you billions of dollars a year for that currency. What can you do with that currency? So yes, you can do spend. Yes, you can create greater avenues of travel, better loyalty, and better opportunity, and better inducements for people, partners, to invest alongside Delta.
Thank you. So we'll take one more question from each side, and then we'll close the session. Make it good.
I'll try. Ed, thanks for your time.
Sure.
I'm Edward LaCava. I'm also a Kellogg student. I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about your strategy for growth. It's made it sound like operationally you guys are doing a great job, obviously many accolades in the last few years. So with your domestic opportunities, as you said, kind of ending in the next several years, it sounded like international opportunities were your better option for sustained mid and long-term growth. And I'm curious, in your strategy for that growth, do you have kind of like an acquisition mindset? Do you have a partnership mindset? Do you see certain regions that are more appealing than others?
Sure, all good questions. The growth model for the next decade is still going to be very much building out the U.S. network. We've gone heavily. Our big airport's Atlanta. It's the largest airport in the world. Sorry, O'Hare. It's been that way for the last 15 years. Over 1,000 departures a day just on Delta in Atlanta. And we've got a big hub in Minneapolis, we've got a big hub in Detroit, we've got a big hub in Salt Lake City. But a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, we started moving out to the coast. And we're now big in New York. We've got the #1 presence in New York. We've got Boston. We've become quite large in LA. We've become quite large in Seattle. So we've got some pretty big assets in each. And we still have a lot of dots to fill in over the next 5 to 10 years domestically. And one of the ways we're doing it is by buying these new aircraft. And when you think about, and just use an older example, let's say an MD-88 or an MD-90 that was around for years in the industry as a domestic aircraft, you'd have about 150 people that you could put on that aircraft tops. We're bringing in an Airbus 321neo, fly the same route. We can put 194, and by the way, it's not like we're cramming 194 in. It's 194 with a better experience, more premium on it, better leg room, better technology, better seat comfort, faster, quieter, 25% more efficient. You win every way you look at that. And you take just one airport, one flight goes from 150, and then tomorrow it goes to 194. That's a 25% increase in terms of revenue as well that you gain on, and really good margin. So that's what you see us doing. You see other airlines copying and mimicking that. We've gotten out of the regional jets, the smaller airplanes, for quite some time, and we've kind of started to move upscale because we know assets and resources in the U.S. infrastructure are scarce. But over time, you're right, it's going to be international. It's going to be Asia over time. And that's going to take some time, right? And we got to figure out what happens on the other side of the pandemic, and what's China going to be like, and what's the future of the relations with China in our country. Really big questions that we haven't really sorted out yet, but there will be opportunities in Asia. There will be opportunities in South America. Just signed a deal with the LATAM group, and they're the largest airline group throughout all South America, and they're our partner. We own a good stake in them. And building out Brazil and Argentina, Colombia to the U.S., we're all kind of in the same time zone, the same range. It's easier to think about the Americas. If you got U.S. sorted out, how do you get the Americas kind of sorted out? And the same, we own Aeromexico as well. And over time, and Europe is pretty, I wouldn't say saturated, but you've got pretty good service to Europe. I'm not sure you're going to see a whole lot more. Africa is something that we're the #1 carrier to Africa. We've been there for years, and over time we can add to Africa, but I don't think it's going to be a growth part of it. So next 5 to 10 years, U.S. Beyond that, it's going to be Asia and South America.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Hari Osofsky. I'm dean of our law school,
hey.
And so I'm going to actually ask a regulatory question.
Have to end on a regulatory question, seriously?
Well, no,
Sorry.
I think it's one you'll like, actually.
Okay.
But I want to thank you for your leadership and insights. So, we've been talking a lot about innovation tonight, and innovation in the context of technology, right? The sustainability questions and what constrains the actions you can take in sustainability are about kind of how those technologies are going to come along, for example, right? And you've been talking about the use of technology and the airplane experience. And of course, one of the things that really constrains technological innovation in so many places, but in a lot of the areas that are relevant to what you're talking about, is that law often deals really poorly with fast-moving science and technology. I think in part because some of the people creating regulation don't always understand the science and technology well enough. So what I was curious about is from your vantage point, where do you see opportunities if we were going to reimagine some of the ways in which we use regulation to drive innovation and drive the kind of innovation we need, both for the airline industry more generally, but for the sustainability goals you were talking about? What would that look like to you?
Yeah. Well, sustainability I already talked about. A lot of it is about not mandating, say, sustainable aviation fuels or putting a carbon tax on the aircraft, which can happen, might happen. It's happening in Europe as we speak. It's about giving incentives for people to invest. So not making it punitive, making it actually a reward. And again, I think all you have to do is look at what's happened in autos to say it's a success, it works. We got to get out of subsidizing EV cars someday, but there's a role for government to play that's very, very constructive in that, and that's not toxic. I think one of the big issues you know better than I is just around privacy. We're a huge company. We serve 50 million unique customers a year, 200 million times a year, because we have a lot of repeat customers. And our opportunity for the future in technology is to work and digitally close the gap to those customers in terms of personalization, in terms of understanding them, what can we do to kind of build a deeper relation between Delta and our customer, because so much of their travel, their life, their job, whatnot, a lot of it revolves around the airline of choice. Yet you then still have the whole privacy aspect to that in terms of what information can you share, what's going to happen to it, or how do you police it, how do you control it? That's a big piece. The big push now, you talk about being backward looking a little bit around regulatory, the big push that you're having, there's lots of pushes regulatory, one of which is around cyber. And it's probably, this is the one question that gets me up at night, with cyber, attacks and threats. I mean, it can bring you to your knees, even unintentionally can bring you to your knees. And somebody not trying to hit you, and how do you have the defense, and the government wanting more information and wanting to learn about it, and we're having to spend so much time educating the government about our cyber. We get attacked over 1 billion times a month. Over 1 billion times a month, right? Just think about that on cyber. And the government wants to know about all of our attacks and what did we do with them, right? And like, where do you start, right? And so, yeah, I feel for the regulators, because it's some of this is driven by politics, and administrations change, and then there's new emphasis, and it's hard to get out ahead of it. All the capital that's at play is to try to defeat. Get around and get there before the regulators figure it out, and you see that happen time and time again. People pay the price later on. Our space, I think those are some of the big issues that we're experiencing. And you're right, it was a good question. Thank you for asking that.
So Ed, do you have any final thoughts, perhaps, particularly for the students who are here with us today?
Well, listen, first of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for staying awake. Those chairs, it's late night, the chairs are comfortable. If you are, have an interest in the aviation space, I know you're transportation broadly, but specifically aviation, it is an awesome business. I can tell you, I have not worked a day. I've been at Delta 25 years. I've not considered work one day in those 25 years. Every day is a new experience. It's a new journey. Yeah, there's been crazy moments. There's been moments of delight. You're tackling really hard issues, and you're relevant on a global scale. There's few industries that are out there, and what's ever going on in the world, the airlines are part of it. We like to say in our business, jet fuel runs through our veins. And it's really true. I mean, it's a very, very dynamic. It's a people business. People think about it. They see the planes, they see the engines, the technologies, the airports, the infrastructure. They think about all this logistics, right? The thing that sets Delta apart is I spend all my time focusing on our people. And I tell our people, I obsess on them so they can obsess on customers. We're a service business. We serve people, and we want to have a better experience. We want to attract more and more of their loyalty and their engagement, and which allows us to grow our business. And so it's a huge service business. It's a huge people business, and it's a fun business. It really is exciting. So anyone out there, send me a note at Bastian@delta.com. We'd love to have you come and see us, and maybe you could co-op or intern or whatever, or join us. We're always looking for great talent. And by the way, if you want to drop out of school and join us, that's fine too.
Thank you very much, Ed. Please join me in thanking Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta. One more time, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Danielle, for your role today. And thank you all for being here with us. The 40th Patterson lecture is officially over. Thank you.